Starting off this countdown, we have Apollo 1. On January 27th, 1964, a fire took the lives of 3 astronauts during the launch rehearsal test. A damaged wire was the cause of this fire. Then a spark in the spacecraft ignited a flame. The high-pressure pure oxygen environment was the perfect catalyst for a fire to start. Then the foam pads and nylon netting in the craft added fuel to the fire. Poor astronauts struggled to get out and ended up perishing in the flames. Their last communication went as so. Ed White yelled, "Fire!" into his headset. Then Gus Grissom yelled, "I've got a fire in the cockpit." Then the third astronaut, Roger Chaffee, yelled, "Fire!" as well. The last thing they all said was, "Get us out." This transmission was then followed by their screams as they were engulfed in the flames. The last thing they said was a plea for help for somebody to get them out of there before they died. Oh, that is so dark. It just sends shivers down my spine. In our 4th spot, we have the Lost Cosmonaut. Back in the 1950s, 2 brothers, Achille and Giovanni Giudica, were working as amateur radio operators. They gathered together old gear and set up shop in an old bunker. In 1960, they came across something pretty terrifying. So they claimed that they got signals from a Soviet cosmonaut that was lost in space. Apparently, she was returning to Earth's orbit when everything began to go wrong. Her spacecraft was malfunctioning, and in the recording, the woman, speaking in Russian, is pleading for help, saying it's getting hot. Then the spacecraft bursts into flames. Thankfully, they saved the recording so that they could share it with others. Now, the Soviets denied this, saying that it was an unmanned craft that burned. But the thing is, a lot of cosmonauts died during the space race. But the Soviet Union refused to reveal those deaths. Half the time, they would just cover them up. So it could be that this recording is real and captures the last moments of this woman pleading for her life. Moving on to number 3, we have the Soyuz 11. On June 6, 1971, 3 Soviet cosmonauts launched into space. Their goal was to make a record for the longest time spent in space. Sadly, the mission failed and they became the first people to die in space. Now, the spacecraft landed perfectly, but when the team opened the hatch, they found all 3 crew members dead. Their faces filled with dark blue spots and blood dripping from their ears and noses. What happened was their breathing ventilation valve ruptured. They died from decompression. They died within seconds. It happened so fast that they couldn't even get a word out. So I'm kind of cheating by putting this one on the list, but the last thing heard from them was a gasp for air, then a weird popping sound, probably from the air in their lungs expanding from the drop in air pressure and being exposed to the vacuum of space. To me, that is more terrifying than hearing them plead for mercy. Like, you're literally hearing them die. In our 2nd spot, we have Vladimir Komarov. Vladimir Komarov was a Soviet test pilot, aerospace engineer, and cosmonaut. In 1967, he was sent on the Soyuz 1. The mission ended very badly, though. Here's the thing. The spacecraft was very faulty. There was 203 structural problems with it. The thing is, Vladimir kind of didn't have a choice. He was forced to go on this mission. If he didn't go, then the backup pilot, who was his best friend, would have to go. And he said he didn't want to do that to his friend, so he went and sacrificed his life instead. Wow, that's just true friend goals right there. What a hero. Anyways, once he began to orbit Earth, a number of issues began to happen, like the antennas didn't open properly. It was his re-entry into Earth that killed him, though. On April 24th, 1967, Vladimir crashed full speed into Earth after a parachute failure. Only a chipped heel bone survived the crash. His body was found as a badly charred lump. On his way down, translators heard him say, "Heat is rising in the capsule." He then began to curse the people who put him inside of this botched spaceship. He was yelling, saying that they killed him. His final moments were him crying and cursing in rage. As a result of this incident, Vladimir became the first human to die on a space mission. Imagine hearing those final moments, though. That would just change your life forever. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Challenger. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart during the flight. It happened only 73 seconds into the flight. This resulted in the death of all 7 crew members on board. The crew consisted of 5 NASA astronauts and 2 payload specialists. Basically, what happened was at 11:39 a.m., the shuttle started to break down over the Atlantic Ocean. It started because of a failure of the O-ring seal in the right solid rocket booster. From there, the right solid rocket booster failed during takeoff. Then the force of the takeoff basically caused the rocket to break apart. Now, it's thought that some crew survived the initial breakup, but the impact onto the ocean surface would have killed them. The last words came from pilot Michael J. Smith. All they heard was him say, "uh-oh," before they lost communication with them altogether. It's believed that the uh-oh came after they felt a huge jolt from the shuttle breaking apart. That's the last thing he ever said. It was later retrieved from the flight deck tape recorder from the ocean floor 2 months after this incident. Now, here's where it gets even darker and twisted. Apparently, a secret tape was leaked from NASA. On this tape, it was revealed that the recording continued on after the uh-oh. After that, you could hear someone yelling, "What happened? What happened? Oh God, no." And then you could hear screams and cries. Someone began to pray, others began to curse. One of the astronauts can be heard saying, "Can't breathe," choking. Another can be heard yelling, "We are dead." Now, apparently this is a hoax and the tape has been debunked, but some NASA employees have admitted to hearing way more after the uh-oh, and NASA is just covering it up.
Number 5 on this list is that green orb. Major Gordon Cooper was one of the earliest American astronauts there was. He was the last astronaut to ever fly in space completely by himself, a feat that's honestly just terrifying if you ask me. While he was out there in space, Cooper saw something that he couldn't explain and something that just doesn't make any sense. It was a rapidly approaching green orb, something that was actually picked up by the radar system that was tracking him in Australia. He couldn't fully make out what it was, but he knew that it was a big object and that it was glowing green. Cooper has since come out and discussed his strong belief in UFOs and aliens. It turns out that UFO sightings are not as uncommon as we may think for astronauts or the government, that these sightings happen very frequently and are very often covered up. For many years, I have lived with a secret, and a secrecy imposed on all specialists in astronautics. I can now reveal that every day in the USA, our radar instruments capture objects of form and composition unknown to us. And there are thousands of witness reports and a quantity of documents to prove this, but nobody wants to make them public. Why? Because authority is afraid that people may think of God knows what kind of horrible invaders. So the password still is, we have to avoid panic by all means. Now that's a direct quotation from Major Gordon Cooper discussing the truth behind his sighting and many other sightings that the government makes on the daily. If this is factual and the government actually does see these anomalies all the time, then it's totally reasonable to believe Cooper saw a real-life UFO while he was in space that time. It should also be noted that when he landed, he was told that reporters were not allowed to ask him about his sighting and to keep it under wraps. Seems to me like these astronauts and the government know some stuff that they don't want getting out. Number 4 on this list is space snakes. Franklin Story Musgrave is a former NASA astronaut who spent over 53 days in space. He's extremely intelligent, having 6 separate degrees, and definitely knows about space since he went on 6 separate missions there. That's why when he came out and spoke about seeing a massive space-like eel up there, it really shocked the world. On 2 of my missions, and I still don't have an answer, I have seen a snake out there, 6, 7, 8 feet long. It's rubbery because it has internal waves in it and it follows you for a rather long period of time. The more you fly in space, the more you see an incredible amount of things out there, and that sort of brings to you really a certainty that other living creatures are out there. Some incredibly primitive, more primitive, some just proteins coming together, amino acids, and some just single-cell organisms and other civilizations that have been around for 1,000,000 years that are doing unimaginable kinds of things. 6, 7, 8 feet long. You heard that right, guys. I know that he goes on to talk about proteins coming together and stuff, but that seems like a lot more than just a few amino acids to me. That's a big creature that he saw not only one time, but on two very separate and different occasions. This is a full-on NASA astronaut who is super well educated, coming out and talking about a massive eel in space. Now, he's the only one who's come out and spoken about such things. However, there was a picture released from the Mars rover with potential evidence of a snake. Take a look at that image right there. That looks a lot like a snake to me, and if there's one chilling on Mars, then there's no reason to think that there couldn't be one in space either. If this is true, then more astronauts definitely must know about this, and they must be trying to keep it under wraps for a reason. Maybe they don't want the public to freak out about these space snakes, maybe they're just scared of them themselves and aren't ready to release the info yet. But whatever the case may be, it's starting to look like our slithering pals aren't just here on Earth. Number 2 on this list is space pee. Okay, so I know how that sounds. No, I'm not talking about some evil urine alien that somebody spotted or some massive pea planet. But this entry is just more about how hard it is to actually live up there in space and the realities of the situation. Also, I guess this is less of a secret, but more of something that just doesn't get talked about enough considering how much it must suck. But listen to this statistic, guys. If you want to go into space and live up there for 1 year, which I frankly don't really understand why you would want to do, but anyways, let's assume that you do want to do that. If you want to go live there for 1 year, then you're gonna need to drink 730 liters of your own urine and sweat. 730 liters. That is 730 milk bags worth of your own excrement that you now need to consume. Now, I obviously have to point out that this is recycled urine and recycled sweat, so you don't need to just pee in a cup and then take a sip or anything like that. But this just goes to show how difficult it is to come by water in space. It's so difficult to get water that we literally need to constantly reuse what we have in our bodies already. Like, you basically never get any new water in your system for an entire year if you go to space. You're just reusing the old water over and over and over again. Honestly, after hearing this stat, guys, I have no idea how these billionaires think that we're getting to Mars. Like, sure, build a ship that can take us there, manufacture a shelter that could withstand the elements, but how about water, dudes? You know, that thing that we need? I don't want to move to Mars and just live off of pee for the rest of my life. Anyways, big respect to the astronauts out there who have to do this for a whole year. You guys are way stronger than me. Finally, number 1 on this list is changing DNA. This one is definitely a weird one and honestly pretty scary. Ranker writes, astronaut Scott Kelly, who spent a year at the International Space Station in 2016, returned to find that he was 2 inches taller than his departing height. The new physical differences between Kelly and his identical brother Mike, also an astronaut, were startling. Scientists compared the DNA of the two and found that, besides growing 2 inches, Kelly's gut bacteria were completely different and his gene expression had changed. Scientists concluded that the changes were caused by the stresses of space travel, which can cause changes in a cell's biological pathways. Although Kelly eventually returned to his original height, his other genetic changes are seemingly irreversible, meaning Kelly and his brother are no longer identical twins. So that's honestly pretty insane. If we go to space, our DNA can just literally change on us. Obviously, we have no idea how this works, but think about the potential that this could have. Is it possible to harness this ability? To be able to send someone into space and cure a disease that they were born with? Like, this truly feels like some Fantastic Four level stuff right here, where we can actually change our human makeup. Granted, we need to look at it from the other angle as well. Could this be extremely detrimental? Yeah, I think it definitely could. You could go into space and then have your DNA totally change on you in a way that's for the worse, causing you lifelong problems after that. I had no idea that this was something that could happen in space, but it's definitely something that we need to do some more research on because, like, it could be wild.
Number 5. ISS UAP. In 2019, 35-year-old Russian astronaut Ivan Wagner was working aboard the ISS as a first-time crew member, where he and fellow Russian Anatoly Ivanishin are working with Chris Cassidy, the American commander of the expedition. NASA didn't mention Wagner's video in a blog update about the mission and hasn't since, which makes this case a little fishy. Wagner was orbiting the Earth aboard the ISS and might have actually captured footage of potential UFOs, or better known now as UAPs, while recording a video of the aurora lights behind the Earth's beautiful curves. He labeled the video "Space Guests" or "How I Filmed the New Time Lapse." Very cryptic. I mean, he is Russian. Wagner wrote in a tweet featuring the video, which shows the aurora australis passing near Antarctica and Australia. He also tweeted, quote, "However, in the video you will see something else, not only the aurora. The footage shows the curved edge of the Earth at night, with the green swirl of the auroras moving across its surface and several star pinpoints visible in the background." He added that the video was shot in a time lapse, so the brief flash of the lights actually lasted for about 52 seconds straight in real time. Yo, I'm the alien guy, so I'm just gonna say it. Yeah, that's a craft. Like, of course it is. NASA didn't follow up? Like, what are they gonna say? Yeah, that's swamp gas, birds, balloons. Cut the feed! Cut the feed! Like, this is nuts. I get how Starlink and satellites are very organized and look like this, but like, come on. Shot from way up there. Wagner did not claim to see the phenomenon as it happened, of course. Good choice. And no one else aboard the ISS has acknowledged it. Also, good choice. Yeah, I bet they haven't. Like, why would you? You know? He also didn't indicate exactly when the footage was captured, just posted 6:24 a.m. August 19th, 2020. Number 4, the original tapes. Also, dudes, if you like what we do here, just keep creeping you out, you know, Hulk smash that like button. It always helps the channel out. And of course, let me know down below in the comments section what other UAP videos you got for me. You know I love that smoke. Send her over my way. I got some good ones coming up from my vault. What do you think? Are we alone out there or what? You know my opinion. Especially since I found out the footage our parents and also 650 million people across the globe watched in 1969 was maybe not the original footage. Huh? Yeah, apparently what everyone saw on every television set across the globe wasn't as 4K as it was on NASA's end. A man by the name of Gary George has come across some very, very old tapes that might have been proof of what NASA was seeing, what we saw, were a little bit different. Gary George, internship NASA engineer team, he bought surplus government tapes for 218 bucks, discovered originally 3 recordings, labeled Apollo 11 EVA, auctioned at Sotheby's, first generation on the moonwalk. It's even cleaner than what's been seen before. It's like a live HD stream to NASA. Okay, so hold on. NASA had a clearer copy this whole time? Like, I get it. Maybe they had a bigger budget, you know, but why did it take so long for these clearer tapes to come out? Like, it's 2019. That's a long time after just accidentally stumble across clear moon landing tapes, no? Like, why was NASA content on only letting us see these grainy, old recorded from a static TV videos when they had these HD B-reels of the moon? I'm thinking so that we can't see what's in the background or what's flying around at them. I don't see a lot of stars in that video. I wonder how long it'll take before Robert Bigelow or Tom DeLonge to get their hands on them, huh? Unfiltered, clean moon tapes. That's gonna cost you. I wonder what else is stuffed in an old box in NASA's basement. I guess we'll find out. Number 3, lost in space. During the 60s, the space race was on between the Americans and the Russians. A race to be the first to figure out what it is to put something or someone up above the clouds in a little metal box to just go and explore planets. Yeah. Although today we tend to look back at the space race with the Soviet Union as a competition we were destined to win, it was actually the Soviets that secured many of the early victories. American officials at the time weren't only worried about Soviet prestige winning out, they had very real concerns about Soviet space dominating and providing them an ultimate high ground in the next global conflict. While NASA's efforts were widely publicized, but sometimes the Soviets made it a point to never really announce a space mission until days after it was completed. Apparently this allowed them to maintain control over information, sharing oddly only the missions that went well, and maybe not all those failed tests also. The Giudica Cordiglia brothers from Italy were former amateur radio operators who apparently caught some homemade home audio recordings which allegedly proves the Soviet space race covered up some cosmonauts' deaths in the 1960s during trial and error. Yeah. Yeah, that's horrifying. Apparently she's saying, "Help, help, I feel hot." Where? Yes, I can. On the left, I see fire. Am I going to crash? Yo, that's horrifying and also really sad. I mean, NASA and the Soviets both launched animals into space that, sorry to say, spoiler alert, never really came home. dogs, monkeys. Lots of weird stuff happened in the early days of NASA. NASA also hasn't issued a statement since the audio recordings have made waves on the internet, but if the two brothers with an antenna and headphones in a basement can pick that up, what's NASA heard and recorded, huh? Number 2, The Dark Side of the Moon. Yeah, not just an absolute banger of an album by Pink Floyd, but also the most terrifying and mysterious places in our galaxy. The Dark Side of the Moon. NASA apparently does hear some pretty weird stuff in its time. Since its erection in the late 50s, the engineers, computer whizzes, and astronauts have all seen and heard some pretty weird stuff. Yeah, they sign non-disclosures, people. They can't really talk about anything. Buzz Aldrin is the only one who kind of dances on the line of non-disclosure and who gives a shit. You know what I mean? But he's old. So what exactly did the Apollo 10 astronauts hear when they were on the far side of the moon that NASA can't talk about and still can't? I mean, 1969 was a great time for tunes, right? Just hopefully not alien tunes. Despite what you may have heard, it's true that the Apollo 10 astronauts heard strange sounds behind the moon. They described it as outer space type music. But that's a very simple non-alien explanation for what crew members were hearing, and it's been public knowledge since the 70s. In the audio recordings from the Apollo 10 mission, astronaut Gene Cernan, who was piloting the lunar module, asks John Young, who was piloting the command module, if he hears that whistling sound. Cernan calls it music and says it even sounds outer spacey. Finally, Young says, "We're gonna have to find out about that. Nobody will believe us."
Whistling sound? Yeah. Look at your... Yeah, it sounds like, outer space type music.
Yeah, that's absolutely terrifying. Apparently we were on the other side of the moon for like a whole hour without command being able to hear or communicate to respond. That's terrifying. You wonder why we never hear anything about the other side of the moon, huh? I wonder what's back there. And number 1, Bullseye. NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test, or DART, spacecraft has just beamed back the first image of its targets. The mini-moon Dimorphos, as well as its rock formation Titanus body it orbits, the asteroid Didymos. Yeah, I kinda knew about this way back when they kept it low, like really low. Kinda just happened out of nowhere. DART is a planetary defense test mission designed to impact the moonlet to alter its trajectory around Didymos, basically to catch you all up to speed here. If you've seen Armageddon, it's kind of where we're getting with this. The DART mission was launched at 10:20 p.m. on November 23rd, 2021, back during the pandemic. I watched this thing go up without any NASA pre-mission statement and I thought, that can't be good. SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from the Space Launch Complex 4 at the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California, that's a mouthful, launched this puppy up into space to kind of give the moon a little nudge. Yeah. The spacecraft is scheduled to arrive at its target in late September 2022, and according to NASA officials, which as of yesterday are right on schedule. The spacecraft has now captured the first images of its double target asteroid anomaly, which includes the moonlet it will crash into called Dimorphos, spinning around the asteroid called Didymos. Once it's slammed into Dimorphos, NASA will make observations of the asteroid from Earth to discern whether the spacecraft was able to alter the asteroid's trajectory or not. Yeah, basically, if it does, that means the method can be used to avert potentially hazardous asteroids on a collision course with Earth. If it doesn't, well, we gotta call our alien buddies for a ride, you know? If proven effective, this spacecraft design could potentially be scaled up to deflect an Earth-bound asteroid. The spacecraft is still 20 million miles away from the asteroids at the point of this picture, so they appear a little indistinguishable. Looks like a little star. NASA will live stream the impact event later this month, apparently. Hopefully with some 4K live NASA, not this grainy film stuff we're used to seeing. The space agency announced live coverage of the DART impact would begin at 6 p.m. on September 26th. It will air live on NASA TV. Hey, I've seen Armageddon. I know what's up. I'm sorry, AJ. You go take care of my little girl. Gets me every time. It's a great movie, great movie.
Number 5. They say in space, no one can hear you scream. But what about a knocking? China's first man in space, Yang Liwei, might be able to tell you what the sound of a man screaming in space sounds like. The taikonaut, the term for an astronaut from China's space program, first visited the stars on a maiden voyage in 2003. While up there, soaring the cosmos, Liwei reported hearing something knocking on the spaceship's hull. He said it didn't sound like it was coming from inside the ship, but it didn't sound like it was coming from the outside of it either. Now, normally, you're not really supposed to hear, anything in space, so this was out of the norm. Liwei went to peer out the porthole just to confirm that there were no goblins or gremlins hanging on the outside of the hull ripping up nuts and bolts, and says he didn't see anything of any note outside causing the sound, which he claims sounded like someone banging on an iron bucket with a hammer. Now where it gets really interesting is that other taikonauts on the Shenzhou 6 and 7 spacecrafts in 2005 and 2008 both reported hearing the exact same phenomenon. One could be a coincidence, one can be explained off, but 3 separate occurrences of hearing something knocking on the ship's hull? Could it be something related to the shuttle's construction? Or is there something haunting the Shenzhou spacecrafts? Wait. Do you hear that? That knocking? It sounds like a transmission coming from inside the studio. Something, a voice telling me that you should subscribe to Top 5 Scary Videos for the best scary videos on the web. It's strange. I don't know what it means. Sorry, let's move on. Number 4. Now we know space is silent. I'd say no one can hear you scream, but I literally just used the alien joke on the last point, and I've hit my quota for 80s movies references already, and we're not even halfway through the list. I think the silence of the stars would drive me absolutely nutty. I don't know how I'd handle the quiet. I need something in my ears. In 1969, a triumvirate of 3 astronauts claimed they heard something pierce the silence. Apollo 10 astronauts Tom Stafford, Gene Cernan, and John Young, while on the surface of the moon, were photographing craters, making memories, that sort of thing, when all 3 of them unanimously claimed they had heard something ethereal on their headsets, claiming that they had heard a sound that was strange, melodic, and composed and otherworldly. All of them described it as music. Now, it's worth noting that it was 1969, so there was no chance that someone accidentally had just left an Aphex Twin album inside the ship's CD player. Commander Cernan said at the time, "We're gonna have to find out about this because no one is going to believe us. Don't worry. Just like the Ghostbusters, we're ready to believe you." And look at that, I snuck in another 80s movie reference without you even noticing. So what exactly was the crew listening to? Could it have just been something malfunctioning on the ship? Feedback from some equipment somewhere? Or could it have been some extraterrestrial entity trying to contact them, or getting caught on the airwaves? Now some speculate radio interference, but not everyone buys the official story, and NASA has never given an official answer. The biggest question remains though is, what does space music sound like? If I had to guess, I'd say probably like Grimes' music. I think that's what moon men are listening to. Number 3. When you think of an alien, what do you picture? A little gray thing with big black eyes peering out at you from a flying saucer? Maybe a regular looking man with pointy ears and a strong brow. Maybe a noble warrior with a cool energy sword. Point is, you probably picture something a bit bipedal because of sci-fi depictions, but it doesn't have to be that way. What about a snake? Space snakes. Why does it have to be space snakes? Dr. Story Musgrave has 6 degrees as a physician, former astronaut, and consultant for the Imagineers at Disneyland. Dr. Story Musgrave sounds like a completely fake man who has one of the coolest names ever, but he is very real, and he has one of the most impressive resumes on the planet. He can also boast that he's been to space on 6 separate occasions and has seen things you wouldn't believe. In a 1994 interview, Musgrave spoke out about coming into contact with something he believes to be extraterrestrial. He said, "I've seen a snake out there, 6-7 feet long. It's rubbery and it follows you for a rather long period of time. The more you fly in space, the more you see an incredible amount of living things out there. And that sort of thing brings to you a certainty that other living creatures are out there." Now, skeptics have dismissed this, of course, saying Musgrave just saw a hose or a loose bit of debris or something, but Musgrave insists that the entity he saw had its own method of propulsion and was following him around directly. He said he saw this creature on 2 separate occasions. Maybe it remembered him. Obviously, Musgrave is considered to be fairly reputable as far as NASA astronauts go, and I mean, if Disney trusts him, he must be pretty reputable. So it seems unlikely that he would tell a tall tale. When asked directly what he thought he saw up there, Musgrave said, "Living creatures far more developed as civilizations. They've been around for 100 million years, and we can't even conceive how advanced they are and the kind of things they're doing. That's why I make an effort to communicate. And I might be considered eccentric because I do, but I do tell them to come and get me." And you know what? Thank you, Musgrave. I'm glad someone is willing to be the spokesperson for aliens. Maybe offer them a ticket to Space Mountain. They might feel right at home at that. Or they might be very offended, I'm not sure. Number 2. Many who go to space see bizarre things that they can't explain. And yet many space travelers don't speak out about what they see, for fear of reprimandation, of being deemed nothing more than a tinfoil hat wearing loon. Russian cosmonaut Major General Vladimir Kovalyonok said on the matter, "Many cosmonauts have seen phenomena which are far beyond the experiences of Earthmen. For 10 years, I never spoke on such things." Well, let's take a listen to his story. In 1981, while orbiting outside of the Salyut station, Major Kovalyonyuk was exercising when he saw something traveling outside the station alongside the porthole. He claims he saw something outside the porthole that was an object he could not explain. He said it was something floating that looked a bit like a barbell, except it was transparent, and it looked like it had something inside of it. He said he saw gas discharging out of it, like it was reacting. He insists that whatever he saw wasn't artificial, and that it moved in a way that suggested life. He said he saw it tightening and pulsating like an organ. He described the entity as being impossible within the laws of physics. As he was observing it, it combusted spontaneously in an incandescent ray of golden light. Seconds later, a golden explosion followed behind it, and two spheres of golden light appeared, which Kovalyonyuk described as beautiful. After the explosions, there was a white smoke and a cloud-like sphere, and as the station orbited around Earth's shadow, the spheres never returned. Unlike a lot of his peers, Kovalyonyuk was very willing to speak out on his experience about what he saw. There was a small investigation into the possibility that it could have been a missile test or a weapons test of some kind, but no conclusive answers were ever found. Whatever he saw, we may never get the truth. And to my Russian viewers, I am so sorry for that pronunciation. Number 1. Major Gordon Cooper is an American astronaut of some renown. The first astronaut to spend a full 24 hours in space, and the last American to spend a fully solo orbital mission. A renowned, reputable astronaut, he's very insistent about life beyond the stars. Near the end of a 22-hour trip around the planet in 1963, he claims that while ending orbit and returning home, he saw a glowing green ethereal orb following him approaching his capsule. The entity was even picked up by a tracking radar in Australia. And yet bizarrely, when he landed, reporters from NBC told him that they were barred from questioning him about the sighting and experience at all. This wouldn't even be Cooper's first experience with UFOs. In 1951, while on an Air Force mission flying over Western Germany, Cooper claimed to have seen metallic saucers flying in ways that would outmaneuver any American spacecraft. He said, "I believe these extraterrestrials and their crews are visiting this planet. Most astronauts are reluctant to discuss UFOs." Listen to this other quote from Cooper. "In the USA, every day our radar instruments capture objects of form and composition unknown to us. And there are thousands of witness reports and a quantity of documents to prove this. But nobody wants to make them public. Why? Because authority is afraid that people may think of God knows what kind of horrible invaders. We have to avoid panic by all means." Now, it sounds like Cooper is alluding to a cover-up. Gordon Cooper isn't just some nut on the street barking out to whoever will listen, but a respected, experienced sailor of the stars. So is this why most stories of UFOs get buried? And astronauts who speak out about it are all labeled as sensationalists? All because NASA thinks that people can't handle it? I think we're ready. I think the stories are starting to come out there. The truth is out there, and we will find it.